All right, guys, welcome back to Local Constrictors. Today is going to be kind of a doozy. Today we are going to talk a little bit about cycling. We're going to talk about the different types of cycling, why we do it, and if it's necessary. I've heard people in the past talk about, one cycling is not as important as the next, or I don't cycle any of my boas and I have babies. And I want to preface this whole video by saying, if you ask 10 different people for their opinion or how they do things, you're going to get 12 different answers. That's just the nature of the hobby. There are successful breeders all over the country and all over the world that do things all differently, slightly differently, and have success. Okay, so there is definitely way more than one way to skin this cat. So I want to start off by saying that there's no one way to do this. Okay, I think overall the most important aspect of keeping boas and breeding boas, specifically breeding boas, is consistency. It doesn't really matter so much within reason. It doesn't matter so much what you're doing. It is that you're consistent when you do that, because I believe that in nature we have a natural cycle. There's temperature cycles, there's humidity cycles, there's migratory bird patterns and cycles, food cycles. There's rainy season, there's the dry season. There's all different cycles that happen in the natural range of the boa constrictor. And I think something that a lot of people get wrong is that they think we need to try to recreate those cycles. And I don't think it's as much about recreating those cycles as just creating a cycle for your animals in your facility to follow. I think there's a lot of benefits to doing that. I think that it helps to, and a lot of it depends on what your goal is. If you want to have babies in January and you want to have babies in July throughout the whole season, I do believe that can be done. I don't think that it's as easily done, and I don't think that it carries with it the same success rate as creating a cycle in your room to kind of concentrate a lot of that stuff. But it can be done. There's people that don't temperature cycle their animals at all. They keep the same temperature year round, and they produce a lot of baby boas. So there's two different things that I want to talk about. One is there is a difference. There's a drastic difference, in my opinion, between breeding second and third generation island localities and more broadly locality boas than there is breeding morph projects. When you get into a morph project, many times you can be 10, 15 generations captive bred. I have a snow and an albino, a snow female and an albino male, and they can just about look at each other, and I have babies. Whereas I have other animals that are not anywhere near like that. So not to take anything away from the morph breeders, I think what they do is fantastic. It's definitely a huge part of the hobby. But I think it's important not to necessarily conflate those two things. Even though a lot of things do carry over, I think you're dealing with a different animal to a certain extent when you get into animals that are more closely related to that carry those natural instincts stronger than something that is almost domesticated, for lack of a better word. So I think those two things are different. You can watch a morph breeder that says, I don't temperature cycle anything and I have babies and you don't need to temperature cycle, and that may work for them. But I'm going to explain to you today why I cycle my animals and why I think that it is a valuable part of the recipe of breeding boas. The second point I wanted to make was nothing that I say today is to say you couldn't put two Cocker K boas in a fish tank in your living room and end up with babies, okay? Everything can be done many, many different ways. You don't have to follow a specific recipe. You don't have to follow a specific type of breeding. You could put them in a fish tank in your living room and possibly have babies. The point of this video and the point of the things that I talk about are more to maximize the chances of success, and to, at least me personally in my facility, in my breeding program, I like to concentrate my babies that are born into the smallest window as possible, because that gives me time. You know, I don't want to be working on pairing animals and also be working on starting babies on feed. You know, I want to kind of have seasons, if you will, throughout my year. I have the baby season, I have the selling season, I have the pairing season, I have the gestation season, and then I have the babies being born season, and then the whole thing starts over. And it allows me to kind of concentrate my efforts into one particular part of the overall picture at a time, where I'm not doing, you know, I'm not having babies born at the same time as I'm trying to find babies' homes, or I'm not having babies born at the same time as I'm trying to focus on breeding projects. It just kind of compartmentalizes my season, and I personally like it that way. I don't want to have babies throughout the whole season. So creating a seasonal fluctuation in your room gives those animals something to trigger a breeding season, and it gets them all. You know, if you look at the Boas range, we've got everything from, you know, Sonora, Mexico, all the way down to Argentina. That is a huge range, and the seasons are opposite. Many people don't realize that the summertime in Sonora, Mexico is the winter time in Argentina. So you've got animals in your facility that are from a vast range of different climates, different altitudes, different seasonal fluctuations. When you look at the equator, the Amazon basin, things fluctuate very little, but there is a pretty drastic fluctuation in the wet season and the dry season, and you still have that fluctuation, and that contributes to food availability. And you also have a fluctuation between humidity levels in that wet and dry season. So there is, and the light cycle is about the same at the equator. A lot of what I'm saying doesn't necessarily apply to the equator, but there is still a seasonality. Even at the equator, there's a seasonality. So everything that triggers these animals to breed, that it's breeding season, is based upon some sort of seasonality fluctuation. So I'm trying to make that in my facility a little bit more extreme than some of these may have in the wild. And I'm also trying to make it across the board so that everybody gets on the same page, so that everybody keys in that it's time to breed at this time of year. It's time to have babies at this time of year. And I still get a range of when my babies are born. There's still animals that like to breed in the warm-up, and there's animals that like to breed in the cool-down. You know, I still get that fluctuation to a certain extent, but I'm not having babies in January and babies in July. You know, it focuses my efforts down. So to me, when I hear somebody say that I produce boas in spite of temperature, I think that is an accurate statement, and I believe that person. But I also think that it doesn't show the big picture of why we do things. I could not change the temperature in my room, and I could probably have boas just like I do now. But I think that everything is an ingredient in a bigger recipe for success. So when I fluctuate my temperatures, I fluctuate my feeding, I put everybody in a swing, and I put everybody in the middle on the same page, that results in success. So I'm going to try not to babble too much. I'm going to try not to go on and on and on, but I think that gives you guys a pretty good idea of why we do things. It's not about the specific, it's not about the temperature fluctuation. It's about creating an annual cycle in your room to trigger and to key these animals to reproduce. One of the benefits of dropping the temperature in the wintertime is I do a food cycle. So my food cycle goes along with my temperature cycle. So when my animals cool down for the winter, their metabolism slows down and their drive to eat slows down, and that facilitates, the cool down facilitates the fasting period. If I kept my temperature jacked up in the wintertime, these animals are warm, their system's moving, they're warm, and they're wanting to feed, and I'm depriving them of that. So by cooling them down, I'm creating an environment that facilitates the fasting. Like I said, none of these things are make all, break all things, and you can breed boas in spite of any one of these things. I just personally feel like if you create the trifecta, if you will, if you create the whole picture, you maximize your success for producing animals. I paired up 12 pairs last year, and I had 11 litters. So that's not to say that it might not have happened had I not done any of this, but I'm very, very doubtful that it would have. When you're dealing with locality animals, you're dealing with animals that are very closely related to their wild ancestors. There is a certain level of domestication that takes place through captive breeding and keeping of reptiles. And many of these morph projects are to a certain extent domesticated to where they will, if you put them in a fish bowl, they'll make babies. It's a totally different side of boa breeding. Not all boa breeding is the same. Not, like I said, not to take anything away from them, but that's just what I believe to be a fact. So I'm going to flip open my iPad here, and I've got a map of Northern and Southern America, North and South America, and we'll go over some numbers. I'm going to try not to throw too many numbers at you because it just becomes a big old mushed up thing of numbers, but I just want to show you guys, kind of put in reality what it is that I'm saying, and show you guys that there is a natural fluctuation in the wild. There is a temperature fluctuation, and I think that that's why we apply it to our breeding program. So we'll flip this around, take a look, and I'll be right back. All right, so I've got my little map here, and I've got my pointer here, and I'm going to try to go over some of this stuff with you. So the boa constrictor's ranges all the way up from Sonora, Mexico, which is about, I believe it's about 50 miles south of the United States border, all the way down into Argentina. So here's the equator. So when you hear people say, oh, well, the temperature doesn't fluctuate in the Amazon or in Colombia, they are telling the truth. They're not lying. But the range of the boa constrictor is vastly greater than just that area. And as you move out further away from this equator, things start to change a lot more. The swings start to become a lot more defined and vary. So we talk about Sonora, Mexico. Sonora, Mexico is right up around here somewhere. In January, we're looking at a high of around 80 degrees. In June, we're looking at a high around 106 degrees. So that's a 20 degree fluctuation. Lows down to 47 in January and down to 80 in June. So we're looking at a huge fluctuation between wintertime lows, summertime lows, wintertime highs, summertime highs. There's a huge fluctuation. So that's up in Mexico. When we get down into Barranquilla, Colombia, where a lot of these Colombian boas are exported from, we're looking at something that's much closer to the equator. So we're looking at a much narrower variation in temperature at the equator. So we're looking at in January, 89 to 92, in the summertime we're looking at 89 to 92. Lows around 75 to 78. Okay, so we don't get a huge, and that's seasonal. That's not seasonal. That's year round. So year round we're looking at around 90 degrees as a high and around 76, 78 degrees is a low year round. Very consistent. But those areas that are consistent with temperature do fluctuate in rainfall. They have a wet season and a dry season, and they do fluctuate in humidity. So there is a trigger, a natural trigger that cues these animals into a breeding season. Okay, obviously they want their babies to be born in a time of year that is flourishing and that is conducive to the survival of those young. So when we get down into Argentina, many people don't realize the whole country of Argentina does not have boa constrictors. So the southernmost point in the range of boas, we're looking at a January low. Now a January high. January is now the summertime, and July is the winter time. So January, the high 85 to 87. In July, the winter time, we're looking at 64 to 66. The lows, 63 to 65 in January. The lows, 38 to 42 degrees in July, which is their winter. So you're looking at a huge range. I say all this not to throw just a bunch of numbers at you guys, but you guys are looking at a huge range of the boas, and we're breeding boas from, Colombia with boas from Mexico, or with boas from Nicaragua, or a lot of these morph projects are a combination of boas from all over this range that do see seasonal fluctuations. I have Argentine boas in my room, and I also have Mexican boas in my room. Well, I need to somehow get these animals that are from vastly different regions on the same page to produce for me. So I do that through creating my own cycle. I'm not replicating their natural environment. I'm replicating my environment, but I'm giving them a cycle to follow where they all get on the same page and they all produce at the relatively same time. If you were to take the southernmost range of the boa constrictor occidentalis and you were to flip that on the other side of the equator, you'd get somewhere around southern Georgia, southern Alabama. So you can see that that is a significantly long way from the equator where everything is, quote unquote, the same year round. Humidity levels for those same regions, in Sonora, Mexico, you're looking at 44% in January to 50% in July through August. So they're definitely at a lower humidity level. I get these little damn gnats everywhere. Excuse me. Barranquilla, Colombia, 77 to 82. Much more consistent. Everything that's going to be closer to the equator here is going to be much more consistent. Argentina, you're looking at 63 to 64%. Much more, 63 to 44. 63 to 44%. There we go with a range again. We do have a range. So I hope that it helps you guys understand a little bit more about why we do a seasonal fluctuation, why we do a cycle in our room. None of these things are make and break. If you have a facility that you're not able to temperature cycle, say you have a bedroom in your home that you keep your reptiles in, and you're not able to operate that room independently from the rest of the house, that doesn't mean you can't breed boas. That just means that you have to still utilize the other ingredients of this process to help facilitate having babies. So hopefully that gives you guys a good idea. When somebody says they breed boas in spite of temperature cycling, I think that is a true statement, but I think it underrepresents what is trying to be accomplished by cycling your animals in general, whether it be food, temperature, humidity, light cycles, or all of them combined together. I think that really maximizes your chances to reproduce. So I don't think it's all for nothing. I don't think it's all or nothing. I think there's a lot of people that successfully do breed boas, in spite of any of those cycles. But I think altogether, the more you're able to do it, and the greater your flow. Like I fluctuate my room by 10 degrees from summer to winter. I think the more you're able to exacerbate those cycles and push the limits of those cycles, the more successful that you're going to be, specifically with locality animals. Not so much in the morph world, but specifically with locality animals. So I hope that helps. I hope it wasn't too long-winded, but I thought it was an important thing to touch on today. So that's it. I hope you guys liked the video. Please subscribe. Please share the video if you like. Don't forget about our US ARC thing we got going on, where I'm going to donate at Tinley however many subscribers we have to this channel. At that time, I'm going to donate that amount of money to help pay it forward. And like I said, I'm not monetizing this channel. I'm just trying to get this information out there. Take it for what it's worth, and hope you guys got something from it. So I appreciate you guys stopping by, and I hope you have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you next time.